afternoon. The Civil War letters of Andrew Jackson Cook. So it was, I do a lot of research on ancestry, and that's where I came across these letters. Cook, a native of Mercer County, Pennsylvania, he was an early settler of Jackson County. And as I've mentioned before, there are a lot of our settlers that did come from that area. And then I noticed, like in other remarks that they have about him, rather than Mercer County, it says Lawrence, but they like, you know, are touch each other, so he was definitely from that area. Andrew Jackson Cook was born May 8, 1833 in Pennsylvania to John Cook and Mary McMillan. John married, John was married to Martha. Okay, so I got that wrong. I meant to say Andrew. Andrew Jackson Cook was married to Martha Matilda Belknap, and they were the parents of 5 children: George, Mary, Anna, James, and William. Andrew and Martha were married in Lamont, November 26, 1862. Martha Matilda Belknap was the daughter of George Belknap, and he was one of the oldest living pioneers in Jackson County, and that was written in the 1889, our history book. He did also die that same year. Mary was only 34 years old when she passed away in 1878, and at the time her oldest child, George, would have been 15 years old, and her youngest, William, had not yet had his first birthday. 9 years after her death, 2 of her children passed away, Anna, aged 17, and James, 13, and they died from a disease in 1887. Andrew Jackson Cook served with the 2nd Iowa Infantry, which was organized May 27, 1861. And in his infantry, 12 officers were killed or mortally wounded, 4 officers died of disease, 108 enlisted soldiers were killed or mortally wounded, and 159 died of disease or accident. They suffered many losses at Fort Donelson and in the Battle of Corinth. In one winter, when they were in St. Louis, they were guarding prisoners at a museum. It was McDowell Museum, and they were using that, you know, as a makeshift prison. And someone stole some of the stuffed rabbits, and they also stole some other artifacts. And no one would confess, you know, to that theft. And so the entire regiment was punished. And the punishment for that was that they had to be marched in the public without music, and their colors were furled. And so I just thought that was kind of, you know, it was kind of interesting that somebody would steal those. And I can see why that no one would confess to that crime, because I'm not sure, you know, what the punishment would have been for an individual. So this regiment fought bravely, and they were just in too many battles for me to even begin to discuss. It would take way longer for this hour. Cook was 26 years old when he enlisted with the 2nd Iowa in 1864. When it came time for Andrew Cook to draw a pension of $12 per month, he needed a notarized statement of birth. And the statement is shown here, and he tells about how his record of birth was in the family Bible, which no one can find, and you know, it's lost or it's been destroyed. Shown is a letter from 1865 from Martha to her beloved husband. And this is how she begins her letter. "Oh, who is it that I love? 'Tis my dear husband." And while nothing has been told about them missing any letters between each other, at that time a lot of people, you know, they just didn't get the letters didn't get delivered to the soldiers, and the letters from the soldiers didn't get delivered home. So it was then during this research for learning about these letters that I found out about the Dead Letter Office in Washington, D.C. Is anybody familiar with the Dead Letter Office? Okay. Okay, so we've got a few people. It was established in 1825, and it was to handle mail which couldn't be delivered. And so an employee would open up each letter and read just enough to search for clues and see if they could figure out, where this letter needed to go. And at that time also there was a law, a U.S. law that said that these undeliverable letters, they need to be destroyed if they couldn't be delivered. So by 1882, well after the war, they were processing over 13,000 pieces of dead mail every day. And by 1893, the number grew and continued to grow to where they had 11 million items per year. And it wasn't just letters, as you know, people sent other things through the mail. And so even in 1899, the Ladies' Home Journal, they inquired as to, why was there so much mail that was going astray? This photo taken about 1926 is the dead letter office. So the dead mail arrived constantly, and the black bags filled with almost 30,000 letters and parcels each day. And that was, again, attributed to this in about 1926. These high casualties caused a general sense of alarm among late 19th and early 20th century Americans. The postal clerks in Washington, D.C. sorted through all the letters that were pronounced dead. Clerks worked to decipher illegible addresses and incomplete or vague or partial addresses, and identify who the sender of the letter was, because sometimes it wasn't necessarily that they didn't have the right address to send to the person, but sadly enough, if they didn't put enough postage on it, they were going to send it back to the sender. And then if they couldn't read that address, I suppose that item was destroyed. This is an illustration from the book that was written in 1901 called 30 Years in Washington. And you can see those are the men that are trying to, they've got the task of trying to decipher these addresses. Once the dead letter office received a perforated tin that contained very much alive rattlesnakes. In the 19th century, retired clergymen and later women were hired for the dead letter office. And it was believed, because of their high moral character, that they were trustworthy enough then to handle and open this private mail. And this was done because in the past, it was pretty common for the people working at the dead letter office, they were called dead letter clerks, and they took advantage of their position. They would open up the letters that contained money and jewelry and other valuables and would steal it. They would keep it. Now there are some that believe that labeling the mail as not deliverable was just an excuse to remove it from society. Another way to erase our history and keep families separated. And that it had something to do with the Great Reset, which is said to have happened by the late 1880s. This photo taken in 1922 shows items stacked up at the dead letter office. When a letter or parcel really and truly died, clerks recycled the paper. I'm confused about that. They say they recycled the paper, but yet everything else said, it had to be burned. So, I don't know. I don't think you can recycle it after you've burnt the paper. They sorted the package's contents and displayed some of the strangest and most notorious items in a small museum. And that museum closed in 1911. As early as 1850s, visiting the dead letter office and its makeshift museum was really, really popular with the tourists that were visiting Washington, D.C. So those of you that said you're aware of this, or no, you probably couldn't have seen it because it wasn't there. I mean, I think the dead letter office still exists, but...
it still does.
It still does, yeah.
All of our mail packages that they don't have an address for goes down to Atlanta, Georgia. We have one central. I worked with the post office for 33 years. So they have just one central location now. It's not in DC, it's in Georgia.
So what does Georgia do with that mail then?
What they do is they open it. Anything first class we can't open. So it goes sitting down there. If they can, like, say, inside somebody wrote their address and they send it to them, but if they can't, they label everything, so if you have a missing package, you have to describe everything. So then they search for it, and they have, it's kind of like the Amazon warehouses, the building is that big. And then if they can't find who owns it, then what happens is they put it up on auction.
Auction, and that's what they were doing way back too as well. Okay, thank you for sharing that. It was during the Civil War that the post office hired women to help. By 1865, 38 women worked in the dead letter office, and at that time there were just 7 men in the office as well. Many Civil War soldiers sent home tin-type photos, but many were poorly educated and they'd never addressed an envelope before. So, you know, I mean, they just didn't know how to do it. The addresses were illegible, incomplete, or wrong. By the end of the war, the dead letter office held 4.5 million undeliverable letters and thousands of unclaimed soldier photographs. So there was as many as 15,000 of these soldier photographs. An assistant postmaster general mounted the photographs on panels in groups of 36 and numbered them in red ink and displayed them in the Postal Museum, which held the curiosities. Families would come searching for faces of their fathers and husbands and brothers that were lost in the war. And the women would come in and they would be, you know, crying over the albums as they searched for their husband who had died in the Civil War. And occasionally they said that a visitor really would find an image of their lost one. And then they were allowed to take that photograph home with them. And I often wonder too, was it really their photograph or did it just look enough like their loved one, you know? Because it just seems like the odds of them finding, you know, that.
And then does it matter?
But it doesn't, yeah, it doesn't matter. But most of the photos remained unclaimed and served as a kind of informal memorial to the Civil War's dead. And here is an example of one of the letters that was undeliverable. And the postmark on it says, "No such office in state named." And I think down below, you know, they spelled America wrong, but I think it says all, or I don't know if it's all, something North America.
Illinois.
Oh, Illinois, North America?
Oh,
That's what
geez.
that
Oh.
Yeah, okay. In 1853, Herman Melville, American author, understood the connection of these letters. He understood that burning those letters meant burning evidence of lives that could not connect. Words that arrived too late, hope that was sent to the wrong address. In 1896, fire destroyed special schedules from the 1890 census records. And in 1911, the contents were transferred to the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian sent that to other museums, and a lot of those other museums deaccessioned those letters when they were destroyed. In 1933, Congress authorized destruction of what remained. Prior to that, one researcher found a box, and it was labeled 1830 through 1876. And she found 4 letters from 1889 that should have been destroyed, but they were misfiled and forgotten. And these letters, these 4 letters that she found, they were from mothers that were writing to the asylums, trying to communicate, I suppose, with their children that were there. Employee Clara Richter was proud of her puzzle solving. The Civil War photographs survived because they were too emotional to burn. In 1885, Clara read an envelope that was addressed only to Son Out West, who drove a red ox. No city, no state, no street. And you know what? She was able to solve it.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what they said. And so this letter that's shown here, the postmark says, "Returned for better direction." October 20th, 1863. It also says Oskaloosa, Illinois, and it's got a 2-cent stamp on it. Shown is a leather-bound scrapbook titled "Blind Reading," that was assembled after 1883, and it contains 21 clippings from the fronts of envelopes postmarked between 1883 and 1884. And they think I'd mentioned that Clara Richter, the one that solved that about the red ox. She may have compiled this book. So the undeliverable periodicals and reading materials were donated to the Washington, D.C. area charities. The items in parcels were sorted, cataloged, and held for a period of time. And then if no one claimed them, they were auctioned off. Just like Dawn had mentioned, they're still doing today in Georgia with the stuff that's unclaimed. So this photo from the Library of Congress shows an auction taking place in the 1920s. In 1899, the Post Office Department removed all its operations into the old Post Office Pavilion. And so that's what this is. The photo of this building was taken in 1910. And this building was located at 11th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. And the building is no longer there, but in its place is the Trump Hotel.
Is the what?
Trump Hotel is there now, but that building was raised for that hotel to be built. Okay, so now back to the Cook letters. This one was written by Martha, addressed to her husband. The postmark year is not legible, and it's the end of the envelope is worn and it's hard to make out, but the writing, this person that deciphered it, said it appears to say, which I think we can see that actually, Mr. A.J. Cook, Company B, 2nd Iowa Infantry, 1st Brigade, 4th Division, 15 AC, via New York. And so on Ancestry, a family member posted an account of her discovering these letters. And she posted this in 2011. This past week, thanks to a wonderful cousin and Aunt Mary's 90th birthday celebration, I found 3 original letters, 2 from Andrew Jackson Cook to his wife Martha, and 1 from her to him. They were in the original envelope, which I took to school for show and tell in the 2nd grade. The front of the envelope has the birth and death dates for Andrew and Martha, as well as a few other family members written in the still familiar hand of granddaughter Alice Cook Schaub. Do we have anybody here from Lamont in the audience? Okay. I wondered if they would know some of the names here. The packet also includes the original mailing envelope with the stamp left and Andrew's Army unit address, an original transcript of one of Andrew's letters, and a transcript that doesn't have a matching letter. So the stray transcript, she wrote, leads me to believe that there's more letters out there somewhere. And she's hoping that someone that has them will contact her. And I didn't see any update on this, so I don't know that anyone has found those letters. And then also included was an introductory letter written by her mother, Wilma Schaub Nagel, to her teacher, Mrs. Priscilla Weinert, who had also been Wilma's 2nd grade teacher. And so her mom told about how precious those letters were to her. And then this person writing this also said they were precious to her. She said a bit of United States history is preserved in them, along with a glimpse of her own family history. Now, I'm not reading these letters in their entirety, and some of the words, are hard to read. So I'm just, little short excerpts out of them. January 11th, 1865. Dear wife, I take my pen in hand to inform you that I am well and hope that these few lines may find you well and enjoying good health, and little Georgie too. So when he left, they had just had one child at the time because they had just been married a couple of years. I am going to tell you what I do this week. January the 11th was going to work on the breastworks. So the breastworks, can somebody fill us in on maybe what, did they wear armor?
It's
Not
like
sure.
stuff they hid behind, they build a,
Oh, it's not, they don't wear it, but
no, it's
like a
fences,
shield?
fences or piled up dirt or rocks,
Okay.
something.
January the 12th. Well, Martha, I have just got my washing out now. 3 shirts, 3 pair of drawers, 1 towel, 2 pair of stockings. 10 cents for a shirt, 10 cents for a pair of drawers, 5 cents pair of stockings, 5 cents for a towel. And so I'm wondering why there's money attached to that. Did they have to pay for the soap? Or, I mean, it sounds like he was washing them, so why was he having to pay? Somebody? No? Okay. I couldn't figure that out. Because he goes on to say, this is my work this forenoon. And this afternoon, I have got to drill for 2 hours, and then he was going to get wood for the night. This is my day's work. And then he signs this, A.J. Cook, on this letter he writes to us. Dear wife, this January 13th, well, Martha, I have just got done washing 4 shirts, 3 pairs of drawers, 1 handkerchief and 1 towel, 2 pairs of stockings. This is my washing today, come to 90 cents. And that just seemed like a lot of money for back then. Did you find it?
Can I? Yeah.
Yes.
It says during the Civil War, Union privates generally earned $13 per month, while Confederate privates started at $11 per month, with pay often rendered nearly worthless by inflation. Soap was a crucial, often scarce, rationed item provided by the Army, 4 pounds per 100 rations, or purchased from sutlers. So
Okay, so maybe he was having to pay for the soap, or do you think he was washing somebody else's clothes?
I don't know.
I was 2 hours doing it and scrubbed my house up. You would laugh to come in and see us work. We fry meat and half a canteen, that half up. When I come home, I'm going to fetch mine home with me. And then you can see for yourself. Oyster can for a coffee pot holds a tin full of coffee. I wish I was home again. We was on this march. If we had not foraged, we would have starved to death. We would go right in the house and take whatever we wanted and go along. We would call that stealing in the north, but down here we call it foraging. Well, I must put some beans on for dinner. I got 14 tin crackers last night that was to last 3 days. 1.5 a meal. They are as large as the top of a teacup, and then some. That's not very high living. Still, you must not think hard of that. If you were here, you would get used to it. Go to bed hungry sometimes. Peas is up here now, 3 inches high. The trees is green here now. I get lonesome sometimes, and then take a walk and get over it and come back home again. They have got to okay, so this doesn't grammatically sound right. They have got to taken likeness now. When I get a pass to go over town, I will have it taken. Azor McDowell got 5 papers from home today, and we all want to reading them. January the 13th, we have the dress parade this afternoon. January 14th, I was to work on the breastworks yesterday, and this is Sunday morning now, and I have got my breakfast over. And it is just sun up now, and we have to wash ourselves. Get just as clean as we can, for we are going out on inspection this morning. And if we hadn't cleaned, they will detail men and take you out and wash you. The lieutenant was going to detail 2 men to watch Azor McDowell, and I went and told him before they got there. And had him washed before they got there. He is very dirty and lousy too. I made him strip and get the lice off him. The boys don't like him, make fun of him all the time. January 15th, 1865. Well, Martha, it seems long time since I have seen you. And it has been long time too, and I don't have the rest of it. Well, Martha, I want to live to meet you once more. If I should be so unlucky as to fall in the field of battle, I want to meet you in the next world. Martha, I have worn the soles off my shoes, walking down to the post office and back, looking for a letter from you. Letter from Martha, written April 14th, 1865. Oh, what is it that I love? 'Tis my dear husband. I set myself this evening beside my trunk to write a few lines to you. I was so very glad to hear from you again. I will send you some postage stamps. I was glad you got my letter. I never know when to stop writing to you, but I think I have worried your patience long enough. Lo, okay, so this is still a letter to him. Lo, we told of that when we was married that we would be separated as soon as we was. I never could have thought of it. What a blessed consolation it is to think she's writing this letter, that I have a kind husband who has taken the greatest care of me when I was sick. I never shall forget it as long as I live. Dolphin thinks, this part doesn't make sense to me, but I'm going to read it. Dolphin thinks since you aren't away, if you was to be sick, he would. You thinks of first to take care of you. Maybe he's saying he'll take care of her. There is no one so very near to me as my husband and little George, the dear little fellow. I must tell you, George is better than when I wrote you last before. He has got over his diarrhea and don't cough but a little now last night. He slept good. And then something I tell you that Georgie and I went out to see our calf today, as it is just 1 day old, and it is a very large calf. It is all over red, but its face is white. It is larger than any of Father's calves. The worst to be, it isn't a steer calf. I am going to keep it for Janet just as well as not Father's, as he will let me have a heifer calf for, maybe it says Georgie. What do you think about it? I blank blank, tell me just what you think about it. I won't swap blank, get an answer to this. The other calf of blank looks first rate this spring. It is real fat now. One could buy that calf. I think too much of it. I hadn't rented the house yet. I had plenty of chances that they wanted it for $3 a month. Old Smith wanted it for $3 a month. I thought it would not pay for me taking the boards off the windows. If she can't give me $4 a month for the house, she can't have it. It is worth that to everyone. I think about peculiar whether I sent or not for a short time as it is. April 17th, my dear husband, once more I seat myself to answer your kind letters I received on the 17th of April. It was a very happy daytime. I had the pleasure of reading 4 letters I got from you. Photo of the home of Andrew Jackson Cook. And this might still be standing. In the front yard is his great-granddaughter Mary with her son Brian, and her daughter Kathy to the far right, and on his granddaughter Alice Cook Schaub is standing by the front porch. Does anyone know that person's name? And the man standing on the porch is unidentified. And on the back of the photo it reads, my grandfather's home at Lamont, Iowa. He lived here when he went to the Civil War. It is back of the Lutheran Church by the water tower. Anybody familiar with Lamont? You know, if that's still there, if this looks familiar. Do you think it's still there?
Yeah, the church.
This is the church?
No.
Oh,
I said the church is.
behind the church. It's behind the church. Oh, okay. But the church is still there.
Yeah.
So this is John's, I took some excerpts from the obituary. Colonel A.J. Cook, a veteran of the Civil War and a native of Lawrence, they're saying Lawrence County, which again, it's very close to Mercer County. He died recently at his home in Bellevue, Iowa. He came here, says the paper, in 1854 with a party of young men. 2 years after his marriage, Mr. Cook left his wife and little son George to go to battle for his country. He became a member of the Company B, 2nd Iowa Infantry, and served faithfully in the great struggle, marching with Sherman to the sea. He returned here after the war and has lived here ever since. 3 children survived. The deceased was a quiet, unassuming man who was generally esteemed by all who knew him. Andrew J. Cook is buried in East Hill Cemetery, Lamont. Okay, so I want to share, a little bit. I'm not asking you necessarily to agree with everything I'm going to share, but I'm just going to tell you some of the findings that I found. So, I do read a lot of the newspapers. I've got several different newspaper subscriptions. I read newspapers from late 1800s, a lot from the early 1900s. And I gotta say, there's a lot of inconsistencies, and they're not just little ones. So this is something I want to share with you about the Civil War that this is what someone thinks. He's looking at this photo. He says, I don't think the war photographers in the Civil War actually photographed real battles all the time. I mean, I think some battles we've seen maybe are real, but he thinks this is a staged photo, this medical scene. He writes to say, notice some of the subjects looking at the camera, but trying not to look at the camera. And look how clean the soldiers are, even the injured ones. No muddy boots, and where are the tracks from the horses or the wheels? The wheels look brand new. So he does have a point. From what I see, I've gone back and looked at some other photos and kind of think, I don't know. So I told you I've been reading quite a few books, and so a lot of them tell quite a different story of the Civil War. And some of these books, are written, not from U.S. citizens. But this one, I'm just going to read you a quote, page 10 and 11, from the book called The Secret World Government or Hidden Hand, The Unrevealed in History, 1929. He says, and according to Bismarck, it was Disraeli and his patrons, the Rothschilds, who invented the plan of destroying the United States by fomenting the Civil War here, and by a foreign attack in 1863 to 64 by 5 powers. The Civil War was started in 1861, and the British, French, Spanish, Belgian, and Austrian troops were already in Mexico City, ready to profit by the Civil War, staged by the Hidden Hand. But then the Tsar, Alexander II, warned Napoleon III that he would invade France if this coalition helped the Southerners to smash the North. The Tsar even sent his squadrons at the disposal of President Lincoln to defend New York and San Francisco. And we've talked a little bit about that New York War before, and I know your husband knew quite a bit about that. President Lincoln had the right to order this fleet to fight any of the above 5 powers. Only thus the United States was saved. Most of the archives containing details about the Rothschilds were purposely burned in Paris during the Commune in 1871, of which one of the Rothschilds was a financier. And so this author of this book was Major General, and he was considered a prophet. And in 7 of his pre-war books were found more than 80 famous political prophecies, which were accurately predicted. And someone wrote, had the world listened to him, this man we could have avoided World War II. Then I did a presentation before about the Cyclops. And I don't know how many of you were here for that one. And we did have a man that died, Nig, now I can't think of the first name. I'm a coconut man.
Charlie Nick's brother, Frank.
Frank Nig supposedly went down in the Cyclops. And I remember including in that presentation, I wrote about how there would be newspapers that would say, oh, yeah, we found the ship, and then all of these mothers and fathers, they would get excited and think that their child had been saved. And then they discount it, the next day. They would say like, oh no, that's a mistake. But since then I found a lot of other papers, and they seem to give a lot of details about that. And this one says, this is a man that was on board, and he wrote a letter to his mother. And it says, I suppose you know by this time they have found the Cyclops in the Kiel Canal where the Germans had taken her. I was talking to a fellow from the U.S. Steamship Orion today, and she is leaving soon to go over and put the Cyclops back into commission. They are taking on coal, oil, wireless equipment, a large amount of supplies. And actually this is now a different one that I was thinking about. There was one where someone actually wrote home, somebody that was on the ship wrote home a letter to his parents saying that, he had survived. So I'm just wanting to share that with you, because I just kind of find that a little bit incredible. And then this past week I discovered this, and it says, all saved from Titanic after collision. And, so I, mentioned something to somebody about, how do you know it isn't AI? Well, I have these newspaper subscriptions, so I went and found the original papers. So I have a special interest in the Titanic, so I'm just going to it's kind of a fascinating story. So in doing my research, one of the family history books I have, there is a relative of mine, not a direct ancestor, but, a great-great, uncle that died. His name was Daniel Morgan. And he supposedly died on the Titanic. And he was just a young man. I'm thinking he's like 18 or 19 years old. And he had just been married. His wedding was actually filmed. And it was said that they were friends of Edison, which is how they had access to having them film this wedding. And then supposedly there was other filming that was done by their family on board the ship. So I was kind of fascinated by this and tried to research the story a little bit, and found out that she had gotten pregnant, his wife, on their honeymoon, and had given birth. And then later her family, and it just kind of ties back to like that movie, The Titanic, is she takes her grandson out in a boat, and she's got this film. I mean, this is the story. She's got this film, and she throws it in the pond or the river or wherever they were in the water. She tells her grandson about that. So anyway, this is what somebody had posted, all of those papers. And here it is, Canadian liners towing crippled ship back to Halifax. And it gives so many details about, where they took it and who helped and, all of that stuff. So, and another paper. 1,400 of Titanic's passengers to be handled by the railways. And then back to this. And these are what I found directly on newspapers.com, the original newspapers. So, what I've also been reading, how many of you have heard about how they say that, there's like 13 families that rule the world? Has anybody heard that theory before? It's like there's somebody way at the top. And so anyway, it's been said about this that they have funded both sides of every war we've ever fought in. And, you think about that, why would that be? But if you can make money on both sides, on the medical end, as well as on making the munitions, it can be very, very profitable. So I just have come across so much information. And I know some of you right now are thinking, this sounds crazy, but I just have found so much information that leads to the credibility of some of these people saying this stuff. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
So I'd just like to say, going back to the letters from servicemen, I spent my younger life with the Marine Corps, I guess, and I had the privilege of going to a big naval hospital right in the very beginning, and reading letters to our servicemen who had come back from, this was Vietnam, who had come back from Vietnam, and maybe they were blind, maybe they just could not read. So I would spend my volunteer hours reading to these servicemen and then writing letters again to the servicemen who, you know, were trying to stay in touch with their family. That's what, 50-some years ago. And people just, you know, couldn't fly across the country to go to that particular military hospital that these people were in. So even though they were well enough to make it back to this country for their further care, they still didn't get to see their loved ones. And it wasn't like today when we had, you know, when we've got email and everything like that. It was so hard for them to be in contact with their family. And that was just one of the most touching things I think that I have ever been able to do, is be part of that, to help them with their letters so that they could see. The other thing that we did that was fun, and this was, maybe this time was at the big naval hospital that was at Camp Pendleton, California. And every time a serviceman would have a birthday, we had a group that would make a birthday cake and take it to the hospital so that they would have somebody there for them on their birthday. But it was just a sad time. And I think the fact that Sue's found some of these letters and things about Civil War people, I think that our servicemen, even today, and especially during Vietnam, those letters are just as important to them as the ones during the Civil War. And I know when Mitch and I first came back here, we would be asked to speak a lot at the Navy Mothers Club that was in the Quad City area. I did that a couple times, and then I got really disillusioned with those mothers because they would be writing to their congressman, my little Johnny this, and you know, because they could be in contact all the time with them overseas by email and everything. And you just need to look back to the times like the Civil War, even World War I, where servicemen would leave, and maybe for 4 or 5 years their family wouldn't know whether they were dead or alive because they couldn't get mail through. It was just a hard time. It was of course easier during World War II and during Vietnam, and a lot of you experienced this during Vietnam. There were the Mars calls. Did anybody get Mars calls? The only time I was able to talk to my husband when he was gone all of that time was we had 3 Mars calls, and they were patched through ham radio operators from Vietnam back to us. And so your conversation, there were dozens of people listening in, as that your call was patched from one person to the next person to the next person, and you'd have to say a little bit, and you'd have to say over, and then you'd wait, and then you would hear him answer, and he would say over. But other than that, it was just the letters that came. And in my case, I hated weekends because there was not mail delivery on weekends, and you just waited for that letter to come to your mailbox. And so I can just imagine how important these Civil War letters were to these men. And I've just seen and heard of, like Sue, a lot of the times when the postal servants, the postal people, just went overboard to be sure that these letters got through. And again, in California, there was a time when we could bake homemade pies, like blueberry pies or apple pies, and flash freeze them and take them to the post office, and they would be shipped, and they were still just thawed out when they got to Vietnam. And how many guys got fresh pies. And that's just an example of how just ordinary civilians like us just went out of their way to do really special things for our soldiers. So these Civil War letters, I think, just magnifies that by 10 times at least, because it was so very difficult for them to stay in touch. And I was fascinated too by your dead letter
Dead
office
letter.
and all that information.
And I was going to mention that this family, the Cook family descendants, they have notified our Gene department looking for more information.
So,
Yes.
My brother was killed in Vietnam, May 19th, 1966, so it's gonna be 60 years ago in a week or two. We found out like on a Thursday, that he was killed, and my sister and mom all got letters from him after we'd already knew he had passed away. Is that emotional when you find out one day that your son or brother got killed in the service, and 2 or 3 days later you get a letter?
You get a letter.
That had to be
Yes.
very
Yeah.
difficult. Roger, are we done? We're done. Roger, did you have a question?
I just find it really interesting what Bonnie had to say and just what was said just now. What I wanted to ask about is, there was Andrew Jackson Cook. At that time, were a lot of the children named after presidents?
They were, you'd mentioned that once before, because in your
Yeah.
family too, you have that, don't
Yeah.
you? You have a George Washington.
And Andrew Jackson Tabor.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, they did that. They
Yeah.
did that a lot.
Often.
Yeah, after presidents.
I think so. All right.
Thank you.